Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Motorsport Diaries, my podcast all about motorsport. And I'm so happy to be having you here today. We are talking about the Singapore Grand Prix, one of my favorite races, actually, my favorite race of the whole entire year, and actually in a very long time, I would say. I think it's my favorite race since Brazil of 2022 when George won, which was insane. Today is a cozy episode. I have my sweater. I have tea right here with my special mug that you guys all love. My motorsport mug that my grandma gave me. It's really stupid, but it's cute. And I'm under the blankets. It's getting colder outside. Fall is coming around. And yeah, get a snack, get a drink, and let's talk about the slays and praise of the Singapore Grand Prix. You're probably like, did I hear that correctly? Slays and praise. What are we doing? Yes, you did hear that correctly. We are going to be doing Slay or Pray podcast edition because Slay or Pray is quick, short, to the point, and we love Slay or Pray. But I can go and talk about those things in heavy detail, and I think some of you guys might want to hear about it in heavy detail and maybe hear more about my thoughts and opinions on things that maybe I wouldn't include in a Slay or Pray. So this is like Slay or Pray extended edition. And today we are talking about the Singapore Grand Prix. Phenomenal race. Right off the bat, loved it so much. I mean, you guys all know I'm a George fan. Crazy Brussels sprout, crazy George fan. So as a George fan, it was very hurtful. And the last lap caused me tears and screaming to the point where I woke my dad up. And probably my neighbors and some hats being thrown. But as a motorsport fan and as an appreciate of racing, it was an amazing race. I would rate it like a 9 or a 10 out of 10. It was so good. I think there was just so much going on. I think the strategies were incredible. And we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about all about it. But I think the first sleigh and the overall sleigh of the day was just the race in general. I think that it served on so many different levels. And I really loved it. I think it was a great break from the Red Bull dominance. I think we got so used to these like boring esque Red Bull dominant races, and I forgot what it was like to have an actual fight and an actual not knowing who's gonna win the race, and that was incredible. So I loved that. So that was just kind of an overall sleigh. Now getting into the first sleigh of the Singapore Grand Prix, I am going to give it to Carlos Sainz. He put on the show of his life. He raced so well, and I think it's really funny because he's kind of been getting a lot of slack recently from a lot of the Charles fans and a lot of the Ferrari fans. A lot of them kind of think that he is overrated and that Ferrari should let him go, that he's causing too many problems, that he's not doing enough, and I think he kind of shut them up real quick. I think that's kind of what this was. And I will say I really liked this race for him because I know a lot of people discredit his Silverstone 2022 win, his first win in F1. Even the commentators, I don't know if you guys remember, but some of the commentators were literally saying that Ferrari won but with the wrong car. So I think that there was a lot of discredit going on with his first win. And I think somewhat of that is kind of valid. I think that the whole situation with Charles was very iffy, but I'm very glad that he finally got another win that is valid and very well done and very much deserved. And it just warms my heart. And I think it was so nice to see him on that podium. It's so weird. Like, it didn't even feel real that he was winning a race. I think that Max has conditioned us to the point where it doesn't even feel real to see people other than him winning races. Like, to me, I was just stunned. Like, when I heard the Spanish anthem, I was like, what the hell? It sounded so beautiful. It sounded like music to my ears. I could listen to it every day. Like, it was perfection. And the Italian anthem, oh my God. Like, chef's kiss. I loved it. I would love to listen to that again. 10 out of 10. So, yeah, I loved that. And I think I was just so happy that he finally has another win other than Silverstone because of how much people like to shit on it. And let's start by talking about his race. I mean, and the other thing is, I mean, he got pole and he won from pole. Incredible. 2 poles in a row. Like, that's great. Do I think he'll do it again in Suzuka? I'm not really too sure. But I think that's incredible. And yeah, he got pole, won from pole. I think he was totally on this whole weekend. And I think he's just been doing really well recently in general. I mean, you look at, Monza. He did incredible in Monza, and he did incredible now. I think he's just been doing very well. Yeah, I mean, his race start was good. I think he was doing well. I think even in the beginning, like when he was saving his tires with George and that whole thing in the beginning, like the first when it was kind of starting to get a little bit boring, as some people would say, you know, and he was saving his tires. I think that was very smart. But I think the highlight and the slayest of his whole performance, the biggest slay of Carlos Sainz's performance comes from the last like 10 or so laps when he was using Lando to fend off the Mercedes. So smart. And I think people like to call Carlos Sainz his own strategist. People make memes about it. Like he's a driver strategist, team principal, like he does it all. And honestly, I think you could really see that today. It was very visible. And I think he kind of does that a lot, but today was very, very well executed. The way that they when his race engineer was like, Norris is 0.8 in DRS range or something, and Carlos was like, yeah, it's on purpose. I was like, oh my god, that was stunning. That was like, wow, he ate that up so hard, you know. And I think that was just so smart. As a George fan, it hurt. And I was like, move out of the way. Like, stop. You're annoying. Like, as a George fan, I was like very upset because I'm like, what the hell? Because obviously it was messing up George's race. But from a motorsport perspective and, from a racing perspective, it was genius. It was so well done. And I know a lot of people are saying, oh my God, Carlando was helping each other out. Like, it was such a Carlando thing. Even the F1, was so weird. Even like on the F1 website, like how they wrote it seemed very like, oh, Carlos gifted. It was so dumb. They were like, Carlos gifted his former teammate a P2 by letting him kind of get into DRS range or whatever. And it was not what happened. I think a lot of people are trying to play it off as like, oh my God, they helped each other because they're best friends. No, Carlos Sainz was helping Carlos Sainz. He would have done the same thing if it were any other driver. If it was George behind him, if it was Lewis behind him, if it was Pierre behind him, he would have done it to anybody. He was doing what he needed to do to help himself win, and he did that. It just happened to be Lando behind him. Was it a slay that it was Carlando? Yeah, because it was like the iconic duo. Oh my God. As a Carlando fan and as a fan of the friendship, that was great to see. I loved seeing their hug afterwards. Oh my God. Yeah, I'll get into it, but something that was not so slay is the fact that after George uh you know booked it into the wall, I was so depressed and upset about it and like threw my hat and whatever and was in tears that I couldn't even like appreciate the Carlando podium as much as I probably would have, you know which sucked. But after having a lot of hours to sit on it, I can appreciate it. Was so cute. Their hug was adorable. I loved it. Live, laugh, love, Carlando. And yeah, I think Carlos did incredible, and I think this really shows that Carlos is not going anywhere. I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon. I don't think that he's going to leave Ferrari. I don't think Ferrari's going to leave him. I don't think Ferrari's going to drop him. Why would they? Who can be better than Carlos for them? I don't know. I don't think there's anyone better right now to fill that Ferrari seat, and I think Carlos is doing an amazing job. He got his first win for Ferrari, like Ferrari's first win of the season. I think he's doing great. And I don't think he'd go to Audi. I think it's pointless. And yeah, big slay to Carlos. So amazing. So happy. So that's slay number one. Slay number two, Liam Lawson. Liam Lawson slayed so hard. And I'm just so proud of him. I love Liam Lawson. I've kind of been a fan of him since I kind of got into F1. Even though he wasn't in F1, I kind of followed him. I kind of saw what he was up to in Formula 2 and stuff, and I like him as a person. I think he's just so respectable, and I like his takes. I think he's just a very respectful, down to earth person and driver, and caring and nice, and he just seems like a good guy to support, and I was just so happy with how he did today. And I think he's really sealing the deal on his AlphaTauri 2024 seat. And if he doesn't get it, I will be at the AlphaTauri headquarters pounding on the door being like, what the actual hell? Because no. At this point, it's kind of like set in stone. I don't know. He got 2 points for AlphaTauri. He got P9 in Singapore, which was insane. Also, you have to remember, he is like, oh my God, he has never raced at Singapore. He's never raced at Singapore before. Singapore is considered the hardest track on the whole calendar. It's the most excruciating in terms of like tiredness and sweat and just It's so humid. I mean, they're told that they lose up to like 4 pounds. It's a hard race mentally, physically, you know, and he never drove there before. He did not have that much training. These drivers have been training for Singapore for a while, They do an intensive training for Singapore. He did intensive training, but not to the level that they did. He didn't have that same training and he came in and did amazing. I mean, his qualifying performance yesterday was very good. We all know he knocked Mr. Max Verstappen out of Q2, which was insane. And I think that just honestly like shows. And I think it's kind of funny that it was the person he knocked out was Max. I think that kind of brought his name to even bigger like I feel like that kind of brought him to like this bigger stage of audience because whoa, Liam Lawson, you know, literally a reserve driver comes in and knocks out Max Verstappen. It kind of makes it this huge thing, which it was. And I really like that. It's kind of like I think everyone was starting to kind of be like, okay, okay. And I'm just so proud of how he did this whole weekend, and to get P9 in the AlphaTauri in Singapore, such a good performance from him. I read somewhere that he got the highest performance of AlphaTauri this whole year, which if that's true, that is very insane. And if that is true, I would start to be questioning things about Mr. Yuki Tsunoda. I would. That's a little questionable that after what 3 races he's already getting he's getting higher than Yuki. I don't know who's been racing the whole season. That's ooh. But we'll get into that. We'll get into that when we get to the praise. But yeah, overall, like such a slay from Liam, and I can't wait to see what more he brings to Suzuka. I'm so excited for him. I think he will be racing in Suzuka, and I'm very excited. And yeah, if he's not in that AlphaTauri seat, we're gonna have some problems because I think he 100% deserves it after the drive that he's been doing. And yeah, that's kind of what I have to say on the Liam sleigh. So that's the second sleigh of the day. The third sleigh of the Singapore Grand Prix is going to the Mercedes strategy because it was so smart and literally when they were doing it, I was like, "Oh my god, you guys are literal geniuses." So brilliant. It was so smart. And yeah, it was great to see in action. It was funny because when George and Lewis were catching up to the pack, like, Lando and Carlos, it felt like Max when he's going on a normal race and like when he's not in P1 and he's catching up to like overtake someone. That's kind of how it felt. And we were just slowly seeing George and Lewis just go, on their mediums, and it was so great to watch. And I think it was an amazing decision, very smart. And it was very fast. They were able to make that decision very fast. And it would have paid off. It did pay off for Lewis, and it would have paid off for George if, you know, he didn't have that little incident at the end, And I think I will also, you know, give credit to Mercedes in the sense that I appreciate their decision when Lewis was kind of putting pressure on George at the end and Mercedes wasn't going to let Lewis pass George. I think that was the right decision, and I kind of applaud them for kind of not calling team orders. I don't know why they would call team orders. I saw some people saying that they should have, which I think is like weird as hell. I don't know why they would do that. Like, it's called racing. Why would they call team orders? But, or like kind of being like, oh, George, let Lewis by so he can try to get the win. And I'm happy that they didn't do that. I don't think they would have done it, but I'm happy they didn't. So, slay for Mercedes. And my last sleigh of the Singapore Grand Prix will go to Oscar Piastri because holy shit, the performance that he put on. We already know that Singapore is literally one of the hardest tracks on the calendar to overtake on. And if you didn't know that, now you do. Singapore, and you probably learned that from watching this race, but Singapore is an insanely hard track to overtake on. It is a street circuit, it's very tight, very stressful, going into it. And people say usually in Singapore, the position that you start in is around where you'll finish. And that kind of rings true for most people, and most times in Singapore. But there's always the exceptions. I mean, we have like that Checo, win, his first win, which is insane. And there was like that Lewis race, but usually where you start is where you'll finish around there. And to see Oscar go from P17 all the way to P7 is insane. And I didn't even notice because nobody was talking about it, which I thought was very weird that barely anybody was talking about it. None of the commentators were saying anything about it, so I barely noticed. And then when I saw it, I was like, holy shit. Because that's like incredible. And also, I would like to point out Oscar didn't have any upgrades, and Lando had 9 upgrades, and Oscar had 0. And Oscar was able to gain 10 positions in Singapore with no upgrades. That to me is madness. And I think he is such a talented driver. I think we're going to be seeing so much more of him and so much more of his talent. And I'm so I'm so excited for Suzuka to see what he'll do with his upgrades because he's getting his upgrades in Suzuka. And I am very excited. Oscar podium potentially. I will be there no matter what. I want Oscar to get a podium. I want Oscar to get a win. I'm a very big Oscar fan. And yeah, his performance today was insane. It was stellar. And I really hope to see more of that in the future. A little bit of a tea intermission. You guys can go and get some snack, go to the bathroom, a little bathroom break, if you will. If you're watching this episode, let me know on like Instagram or TikTok or whatever, DM me if you're drinking anything, like what you're drinking. What's your drink of choice for today's episode? Mine is green tea, one of my favorite teas, and it's very good. And yeah, let me know what your drink of choice is or your snack of choice if you're watching today's episode. I would love to know. So now that we've talked about our amazing slays of the race, we're going to get into some of the praise, some of the not so great things. And, imagine that there's a pray collage here. Just imagine it. But we're going to talk about the praise of the race. And obviously, we have to start out with Mr. George Russell. And I'm not saying this in a negative way necessarily because I've seen some comments and a lot of people are being very rude to him. And I feel very bad for him. There were so many people that were like sending him death threats and saying really mean things to him. A lot of them were Lewis fans that were kind of like, oh, he should have let Lewis pass, whatever. But obviously, George will get a pray. I feel so bad for him. As a George fan, I was devastated. I was so happy for like literally all of the race. I was predicting. I was expecting him on the podium, and at one point I was even expecting a win, and I was so excited. And then I realized he wasn't going to get the win. So then I was happy with the podium, but I was like on edge, about to vomit. And then all of a sudden I see a Mercedes go into the barrier, and I was praying that it wasn't George. And then I was like, oh no, and it was. And it was hard to watch. And watching his post race interview was even worse. He was literally on the verge of tears, and it was so sad. And I think it's really hard, and I can't even imagine how he feels. That's the thing. I can't even imagine how he feels. Like, to literally do 62 laps in the hardest race of the year that you trained so hard for so long. The training that they do for Singapore is insane. Like, they train on the treadmill with full gear and everything, full race suits, and they do in the sauna, like they do insane things for Singapore. And all of that mental and physical training that went into that. He wanted that win so bad. Like during the race, that's all he was talking about. He was like, I want this win so bad. He was so ambitious. He could have had it. I mean, at one point he couldn't have, but there was that hope that he could have done it. And he did 62 laps, put on such an amazing performance, was gonna at least get a podium, and he was pushing so hard, all for it to go down the drain by, over pushing and kind of going into the barriers on the last lap of the whole race. That is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And I can totally understand why he was in tears. I was in tears, you know? And it's really, really sad. It was really sad to see it happen. And I know that there's a lot of, talk about why he, lost focus or like went into the barriers. Obviously, it was a racing thing, and he was trying to push the hardest he could to get to Lando. And I mean, I personally do think that Lewis was putting some pressure on him, which makes sense. And I'm not mad about it. I'm not like, oh my God, Lewis, what the hell is wrong with you? Because it makes sense. Obviously, Lewis wants to put pressure. Obviously, Lewis was going to try to overtake him at some point, in my opinion. I thought he was going to do it anyways because, why would he not try to go for the podium? There was no team orders. Obviously, he's going to try to go for the podium, so it makes sense. But I will say, I think that that could have contributed to George's little incident because I think he was under that pressure from Lewis and he kind of knew that. So he had to really push the hardest he could, which obviously is a racing thing. And you can't put any blame on Lewis. It was just an unlucky thing that happened to George and it sucks. So I'm going to give him that pray of like, I hope it wasn't too hard on him mentally. And I hope that he can come back for Suzuka and be stronger than ever. And I hope that he won't let it affect him too much. And hopefully he'll get a podium in Suzuka. I'll be cheering for him. And yeah. Also, I want to say some small praise because I have like my big praise that I'm going to really dive into, but I have some small praise, some honorary praise, if you will. And my two honorary praise go to SC Bestie because he DNF'd on his birthday, and that's really heartbreaking, and I feel so bad for him. And I saw his Instagram post that he posted, I think, before the race, and it was like happy birthday with like a birthday cake, and he looked so happy. And I was just like, oh, and I saw it after the race, and I was like, oh, that's really sad. So honorary pray to him. That was really rough. And an honorary pray to Checo, only because the Alex fans are coming for him, as they should, because what he did to Alex was, I don't even know. I have no words for it. So I think he deserves what he's getting. Not like hate, but yeah. And the fact that he got away scot free with like no penalties, I don't know. That's kind of wild in my opinion. So honorary pray to him, I guess, for that. The next pray that I'm gonna give is to Yuki. I think Yuki really deserves a pray. I think what's happening to him like isn't fair, and the thing that sucks is that these DNFs and this unluckiness that's going on with him is happening at the worst time. He would have been better off having this happen in the beginning of the year, and of course now that he's in this fight for the second AlphaTauri seat or like for an AlphaTauri seat, he's getting these DNFs and all this unluck. That's not a word. He's getting all of this unluckiness, and it sucks. Like he didn't even start in Monza. He didn't even start the race. And now he did what, one lap, and then that was it. He had a puncture and he was done. And it's not even his fault, and it sucks. And it sucks because he's not getting time to like prove himself. And it's also hard because now you're seeing Liam do so well. Like today you saw Liam put on a great performance, getting into the points, getting his first F1 points, and he's not even an F1 driver, he's a reserve. You're seeing all this happen. And then there's Yuki, who you can't even really compare, but people are still gonna compare it. And and if maybe Yuki raced today and Yuki got like, I don't know. Let's say Yuki got like into the points. And then maybe if Yuki got into the points today, maybe Liam's accomplishments might not have looked as amazing. But because Yuki wasn't there, Liam was the only AlphaTauri to kind of look at, and that was really great. So I'm really praying for Yuki that hopefully his luck gets better, and hopefully this unlucky streak just stops because he really needs to be showing himself right now, and he really needs to be showing AlphaTauri what he's got, and this unluckiness is not helping him at all. Now, the next pray I'm going to give is going to Logan. I think Logan deserves a pray for this race. I think in general he deserves a pray because that Williams seat is really on the rocks and it's questionable. And I think with Liam getting his first F1 points before Logan, it kind of puts things into perspective a lot, and it makes things look bad. Now, if I were Logan, would I be stressed for my seat? Not necessarily, but I think I would just be more embarrassed. Like mentally, I'm praying for Logan because to not to still not have your first F1 points and then see Liam Lawson, who after 3 races gets his first F1 points in one of the hardest tracks on the calendar, I would be upset. I would be embarrassed. Now, let's talk a little bit about Logan's seat with Williams, and I'm going to do another episode all about, silly season and the AlphaTauri seat, the Williams seat, all of these things. But I'm just going to summarize a little bit right now. With the Williams seat, do I think that Logan is at risk? Slightly. But at the end of the day, you look at who could potentially replace him, and the options are not looking good. There's not really a lot of options. People are looking towards Vesti or Teo Pucher or even Felipe Drugovich, but those are all drivers who are even more inexperienced than Logan. And why would Williams go for an unexperienced driver? They would rather build up and kind of work with Logan and see if he improves next season. That's what I would think. Or they're going to go for someone who's more experienced, who they don't have to wait to perform and, build as a driver. And that person, the only person I could think of would be Mick. But Toto has already suggested that Mick isn't going to get that seat. And it's been kind of hinted that Mick might try to do endurance racing and Le Mans. So I don't know. Basing it off of that, I think Logan C is pretty secure for next year. But I think I'm praying for him in the sense that I would be embarrassed. I would. And I feel bad for him. I really feel bad for him. I feel for him. And he's probably not doing well mentally. He's probably very upset about this, as one would be. And, it sucks. And I pray that he comes back in Suzuka and gets points. I want him to get points very bad. And if he doesn't get F1 points this year, it's going to be very questionable. And I think, I don't know. I do want him to get points. I think he needs to adjust the car still. I think he's still very nervous, and I think he's still not used to the car, and I think he's just kind of I think he's not trusting the car, and I think that's why he needs another year, because I think he's just very scared and, insecure in the car, and that's why he's not driving to the best of his abilities. But yeah, I don't think he's a confident driver right now, and I think he needs to get that confidence. But that's kind of what I think about that, and that's why I'm giving him a pray. I think he deserves a pray for that race, to be honest. And the last pray of the Singapore Grand Prix is going to Charles Leclerc. And he's getting a pray because his team just doesn't want to listen. And I don't really understand why, but they just never listen to him. They never listen to him. And I'm praying for him because somehow he's always getting screwed over. And the thing is, this has nothing to do with Carlos. And I know there's a lot of people that like to compare Charles and Carlos. And whenever something goes wrong for Charles, they like to put it onto Carlos. And they're like, what the hell? You can appreciate Carlos, but also feel bad for Charles. They do not, they exist separately, And that's what I'm kind of doing. Like, I think that in the beginning, Ferrari putting Charles on softs to pass George and like that whole strategy I think was pretty smart. I think that was pretty good for on their end, and I kind of approve of that. I think that was smart. Good on them. And I think that they were trying to set up a double Ferrari podium, and I think it would have happened if the pit stop wasn't fucked up. Now, when I first watched it, I thought, oh well, it wasn't Ferrari's fault. They just got held up by Lewis in the pits. Like there was just a lot of traffic. It wasn't their fault. But I rewatched some clips and I rewatched some of the onboards, and it seems like Ferrari messed up the timing with the pits and ended up pitting Charles too late. And they were like keeping him too slow. And that's what happened. So if they wouldn't have screwed up, he would have been fine. But they screwed up the double stack. And that's why there was so much traffic when Charles was still there. And Lewis was able to kind of go ahead, and then Lando and all of these things because of like that little oopsies from Ferrari. So on that side, I'm kind of like, what the hell? Come on. Come on. Could we not get one good pit stop? So, that sucks. And then on top of that, Charles wanted to pit under the safety car like Mercedes did. He really wanted to, and he kept asking on the radio, and his engineers were like, no. The strategists were kind of like, no. They weren't going to do it. They just kind of were like, whatever. And I just can't understand it. I don't know why they're not listening to him. Like, and I feel like they've been doing this for a couple races already, and last year I did kind of have that criticism of Charles in the sense of like I did think he was being a little bit too kind to Ferrari, and I think he should have stood his ground a little bit more. And I think he should have kind of made his own calls at sometimes. I think he was being, too trusting, which of course you have to trust your team, but there were times I think he was being a little bit too nice with them. And this year he's starting to kind of put his foot down, and he's trying to kind of tell them, no, this is what I want to do. And I'm super proud of him, except now they're just not listening. And it sucks. And I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what they're doing. And, I just kind of, that's where my praise is coming from. I'm praying in the sense that, like, it's rough. I didn't even know. I don't know. Like, why they're not listening to him. It must be hard when your team is not listening to you. It has to be frustrating, So I pray that somehow the team will start listening to him, or something will get resolved, because what the hell? Or that they will get smarter with their pit stops or stop screwing Charles over. That would be lovely. Found out a way to get one car really good. Let's get the other one there, Good idea. And I think that something I will say about Ferrari, though, and I'm probably going to make another video on that as well, like another podcast episode, but I think that a big problem that they're having is the fact that they don't have a number one and number two driver. And I know that this might be controversial, and maybe not everyone will agree with me, and that's fine. But it's kind of something that I've noticed, and I think that if you are very serious and you want to be in the contender for a championship or anything like that, you need to pick a number one and number two driver. I mean, we had the Silver War we had the Mercedes era, and look how that turned out. I think, I mean, you look at Red Bull, you look at Checo and Max, you look at Valtteri and Lewis with Mercedes, when they had a clear number one and number two, it worked the best in terms of driving and strategy, winning. And I'm not saying that Ferrari has to do something like that, and I hope they don't do something like that because that would be terrible. But I think, and maybe, I think, do I think they necessarily have to have a number one and number two? No. But I think that it's either they make a number one and number two, which will help their strategy, or they learn how to fix their strategy and they learn how to have a good strategy with keeping them equal. Because I think right now they're sacrificing doing well and they're sacrificing the best strategy for having a fair strategy and being equal to them both. And you can't do that. And I think, I mean, you look at Mercedes, like Lewis and George, I would say that right now there's not a number one and number two driver, and it's working out for them, but it's because Mercedes knows how to manage those strategies and those two cars, and it's just working well. Like, they know what they're doing. And I think Ferrari just can't do it because I think that Ferrari tries to be fair, but I think they don't think things through sometimes. And I think that sometimes the strategy gets sacrificed because they don't want to tread on toes, and like they want to be fair to both drivers. You look at Silverstone 2022, and this might be controversial, but you look at Silverstone 2022, and I think that's a clear situation where they wanted to be fair towards Carlos. They wanted to give Carlos the opportunity to keep his win, and they didn't want to. They weren't going to be like, okay, Charles, you can overtake him. He's too slow. But should they have let Charles technically overtake him? I think yes. I think that, like, I don't know. I think it's questionable, and I think was it would it have been right that they would have let Charles take away Carlos's first win? No. But from a strategy standpoint, it made the most sense for Charles to overtake Carlos. And there's some situations where their strategy would make sense, but they just don't do it because they want to be fair towards both their drivers. And in the end, both the drivers just get screwed over. It doesn't help anyone. And that's what I kind of think about that. Maybe it's a controversial thing. Maybe you're not going to agree with me. There probably are people that don't agree with me, and that's totally fine. But yeah, that's kind of what I think about that. Maybe my opinion will change. But so far, that's what I think. But yeah, those are pretty much all of my slays and praise of Singapore. I loved this race. 10 out of 10. Did I shed some tears? Of course I did. But it was a great race to watch. The Spanish anthem was beautiful. The driving was beautiful. The strategy was beautiful. The fireworks were beautiful. I loved the lights. Lando's helmet was super shiny. It was good vibes. And yeah, I hope you guys liked this extended version of Slay or Pray. I'll probably end up doing this for every race now, which would be cool. And yeah, I will see you on Thursday because that's when my new episode will come out because I'm releasing episodes Monday and Thursday. So I will see you on Thursday. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great week until Thursday, until I next see you in an episode. Thank you for listening. If you liked this episode, you can leave a like, I guess, and subscribe or follow me on Spotify if you're listening on Spotify. And I think you can also leave like a review or something, or it'll ask you on the bottom. So if you scroll down, it'll ask you what you thought about the episode, and you can leave me some tips or comments or anything, about my episode. And yeah, have an amazing day. Bye.